Okay, now, I've lost the sunlight. I mean, I have a ring light as well, obviously. Can you tell? I must be right because the sun is lighting me up much brighter. It being September again, first of all, yay, happy fall. This is my season. It's the season I enjoy the most. I hope that everyone else will enjoy it with me just as much as I do anyway. And also what this has meant is that, as happens at this time of year, and I suppose as is fitting to me as a deeply nostalgic person, I have been hit by an absolute wave of nostalgia in which I have wished almost every day over the past several weeks that I could go back to being a teenager, despite having not actually enjoyed my teenage years that much. But wow, I mean, I want it now. I want it now. I'm ready. I'm finally ready at 35 to go and be a good teenager and actually have fun and make the most of my teenage years. But alas, in fact, it doesn't work that way. I've also been spending a lot of time in the internet's nostalgia machine. Particularly, I have been enjoying those posts on TikTok where they display pictures in a slideshow of let's say, an American neighborhood in the fall, orange leaves, pumpkins on the porches. It's kind of dim and hazy, and there's some kind of nostalgic music playing. Or also sometimes there's the Christmas winter version of this where it's again, an American neighborhood, just pictures of houses on a slideshow, lights, Christmas lights. It's I mean, those do get me every time. Let me tell you, I will stare at them for longer than is necessary or desirable. But, I realized that my nostalgia maybe came to a bit of a head sometime last week when I was, again, scrolling through TikTok, came upon one of these nostalgia slideshow posts, except this time it was a series of images of these bath bead things that you had in the 90s. And first of all, I remembered having some of these bath beads. They're bath beads filled with a fragrant bath oil or something. I don't even know. I don't think I ever actually used them, but I'm pretty sure somewhere in my youth, we had some opalescent pink bath beads. And anyway, I sat there and I watched this TikTok for probably a good 10 minutes just on a loop. And that was when I knew that the nostalgia had indeed gone too far. And it was time to get to the bottom of it, theoretically. So at least I understand my plight, even if I can do absolutely nothing about it. And so the first thing I wanted to do was figure out, first, am I alone in this? Obviously not. People are making these social media posts indicating that they too are feeling the same nostalgic impulses. And this was when I went back to 2023. Not nostalgically back to 2023, in a research sense. I went back to 2023, which was, of course, widely known in popular culture, or at least online culture, as the year of the girl. And now the touchstones, of course, of the year of the girl were Taylor Swift's Eras Tour and the Barbie movie. And so in this time, we had a lot of pink circulating around. We had a lot of sparkles. We had a lot of girlish joy. There was this real vibe in the air that girls are the future, that society is finally taking women's interests seriously, that girls will save the world. And coinciding with the year of the girl, of course, were just normal, everyday, non-pop culture icon girls writing essays on Substack about girlhood, which actually continues to this day. Would you believe it? Even on this day in September of 2025, I was scrolling through Substack earlier and found a girlhood essay. And I was are we still doing that? I thought we were done with that, but there was the real trend of wearing bows in your hair, a la a little girl. There was a trend of Mary Jane shoes, which I think is still actually a trend. I think I saw several people in London, in a very trendy East London where I live, in the past several days wearing Mary Jane shoes. So that girlhood trend is alive and well, as are, I think, hair bows. Honestly, the internet would have me believe that hair bows are out, but I think, judging by what I see around me, hair bows are very much in. We also have girls posting pictures of their artfully cluttered room saying, I'm just a 20-something, even 30-something teenage girl. And those also get me every time where I'm looking at their artful clutter and I'm like, is my artful clutter as good as that? Could I like up my girlish artful clutter game? I don't know, maybe I probably could. We have girls making their girl dinners. That was again several years ago, but I think, I actually still see people talking about girl dinners from time to time. Most recently amended to, it's not just a plate of like nuts and seeds, it's a plate of pasta, which I do agree with. We have girls having their girly nights, painting their nails, girls. And, all of this is fun. It's online. It is frivolous. We know it's frivolous, even though it's probably bad to call something related to girlhood frivolous. I mean, that's what all the girlhood essays would probably criticize me for doing. And they would say, in fact, I should be taking this concept of girlhood very seriously. I don't know. Anyway, but like looking at all these girlhood posts honestly didn't give me a very clear picture of what girlhood was or why I was feeling such a drive to return to past versions of my life. And it wasn't really until I read Gia Tolentino's essay, Pure Heroines, which compares representation of girls in literature directed at children versus representation of women in literature directed at adults. And this essay, first of all, referenced a lot of children's books that I indeed remembered. And then it was there that I started to think, okay, now I think I'm starting to remember what girlhood was. So what these children's books do is they present children having adventures, being agents in their own lives, doing brave things, standing up to tyranny. As Gia Tolentino writes, childhood heroines aren't always fearless, but they are intrinsically resilient. And that was what I grew up on. It was like this steady stream of characters who were always taking action, doing things, learning from their mistakes, having mishaps and misadventures, but ultimately everything remains very exciting, very active, very bold. And that all compares a bit negatively to the literature directed at adults, which very much frames the adult heroines as building their lives entirely to the point of having marriage and children, after which point they are essentially removed from the social landscape as relevant people. And so, of course, you grow up on a diet of this children's literature thinking, hey, life is exciting. I can be whatever I want to be. I can do whatever I want to do. And then you read adult literature and it's like, no, you can't. No, you're supposed to be a wife and mother if you are a woman. And I mean, if you're a man, I guess you're supposed to be like the suburban dad who was heroic perhaps in his past, perhaps a high school sports star or something whose life is then on a steady decline into obscurity and obsolescence as life goes on. But the childhood heroines, oh, wow. I mean, some of my favorite books during that period were Ella Enchanted, which is like a Cinderella retelling about a girl who is cursed to be obedient. And so what it is that every time someone gives her a direct command, she has to obey it perfectly. And now, I mean, look at that in comparison. Of course, obedience here is considered to be like the worst curse you can possibly have. Whereas like in adult life, I mean, if you're not obedient, like, how are you going to survive in this world? You can't. How are you going to have a job if you're not obedient? You're not. So what I was observing, of course, was that there was this real disconnect between the experience of childhood as experienced through the childhood literature of my memory, and not only the experience of adulthood as exemplified by adult literature. That sounds like I'm... Anyway, so there was a disconnect between this literature directed at children and the literature directed at adults. What I was also starting to realize was that there was a disconnect as well between the literature directed at children and the representation of childhood that I got on the internet. And of course, as I thought about it, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, obviously, childhood, adolescence, nostalgia on the internet, all has been marketized. Like, it's all been collapsed into something that can somehow sell you something. That if you are looking at images related to your childhood, say you're looking at images of someone's girlish bedroom, you're like, I wonder if my girlish bedroom compares well enough to this girl's girlish bedroom, and I wonder if I need to purchase more products to make my bedroom more quirky and artfully cluttered. But also, this internet childhood nostalgia just didn't seem real. This wasn't the childhood of the books. This wasn't the childhood of youthful heroism and like being a kid and wandering through the neighbors' backyards and going and breaking into their tool sheds and stealing their raspberries and contemplating whether we should break into the pool as well. But I mean, that's just my childhood, I guess. Tormenting the mean old ladies in the neighborhood. Whatever, they had it coming. But yeah, like the childhood that was presented to me online was nothing like this, but it also didn't seem like a representation of anyone's childhood. And it seemed, as Baudrillard, I say that right? Baudrillard, put it in oh wow. Look who has a book to hand in Simulacra and Simulation. As Jean Baudrillard put it, that what I think had happened to these images of childhood was that they essentially, through the endless repetition of some vague idea of what girlhood must mean, had turned into a copy without an original. We have this online image of what girlhood is, but it has no actual antecedent in the real world. It's just a fake. And it feels very unsatisfying, of course, and yet it also on some level feels compelling because it still speaks to something within us, some longing, some desire, some hope for the future somehow, that if we just internalize these images of girlhood, that we will be more like girls ourselves. Ooh, got very dark there. That's spooky. That if we just internalize these images of girlhood, that we too can become more like girls. I'm sorry. I mean, just like, God, I'm playing with the dramatic effect of the lighting. Drama. That was also a hallmark of my childhood. I was like a bit of a theater kid. Take that as you will. I really actually would like the sun to come back because it's giving me quite a dark vibe here. What I mean is that we internalize these images and then we project and propagate them ourselves as a means of tapping into some feeling, some lost, forgotten feeling, maybe a feeling similar to the feeling inspired by children's literature. Edward Bernays, the founder of the discipline of public relations, was instrumental in this idea that marketing should function as a means of selling self-image creation to the people. And similarly, when I see an image of a girl's artfully cluttered bedroom, I have the desire to be the type of girl, the type of like interesting, arty, quirky girl who has this kind of artfully cluttered bedroom. And I want to go out and buy the things that would make my bedroom look that way. And that if I did this, I would be happier. I would be more creative. I would be more tapped into my sense of self. All things that I genuinely do want in my life. Like, of course, I want to be creative and tapped into my sense of self. And sometimes I do think, well, sure, if it's an object that's going to get me there, fine. I'll buy it. I'll buy the object that will get me there. And sometimes, of course, like an object can get you closer to feeling that you are expressing yourself in the way that you want to express yourself. Like, I don't think all purchasing of objects is bad. And that is the very thing. Like, I think all of this taps into an important aspect of desire. And I think desire is so critical and what gets so missed out from these like internet, slightly left-leaning conception of like what is marketing, what is the value of marketing. And there's this idea often that marketing fundamentally is terrible, that consumerism is terrible, that to desire objects is terrible. I'm in no way in favor of extreme overconsumption, but sometimes you do just want stuff. And sometimes there's psychologically something behind your desire for stuff. Sometimes it taps into both what you want, but also what you feel that you do not have. And that, I think, is interesting in understanding society. Marketing taps into a sort of longing.
Fall 2009 has become a cultural shorthand for yearning, mythologizing it to a level of specificity in that yearning that I'm not sure we've seen in other cultural trends.
I feel like we don't really talk about this a lot, but for like almost every person out there, you have like a deep sense of grief for the era that you were raised in. Like there's a sense of loss that you will never get to be an adult in that time.
And the reason we see a marketed image and the reason it takes hold in culture as something that then so many people are craving, well, doesn't that point to something that is lacking? And it brings me to the way that I see people talk about musicians like Taylor Swift, who of course do on some level tap into the youthful energy through their music to sell product. I'm like neither a Taylor Swift lover nor a Taylor Swift hater, but I think she is interesting as like a cultural reference point because she's been around for so long through so many iterations of her career. And I think she works really hard to represent through her music what people desire. And a lot of the time when I see people commenting online about Taylor Swift, it kind of takes this general form where people are saying, oh, well, she only writes music for children, and anyone who listens to her music as an adult must be fundamentally immature. So effectively shaming someone for liking something, which of course is like always terrible. Like, don't just... And also, I mean, just as like an aside, I would say that I don't even think that's correct. Like, I think she wrote about the experience of being a teenager largely when she was a teenager. And I would say that really now she writes primarily about the experience of being an adult woman, however that may look for her. And I also was looking at the syllabus for like a Harvard course on like kind of the music and context of Taylor Swift. And in the course description, it talked about how the class would critically analyze the way that Taylor Swift markets childhood, markets adolescence, markets girlhood and youth. And I can tell though, even not having taken the course, that it would of course that it would be a very critical view of her marketization of childhood. And yet again, I think that what is missing probably from this discussion, again, I'm talking about stuff that I haven't experienced, so like, just like bear with me, okay? We're doing a thought experiment about what it would be like to take the Harvard course about Taylor Swift. And we're assuming that it's going to be a very critical read of her marketization of the concept of childhood. That's what we're doing. I would have to wonder if the discussion would then also address how this marketization of childhood taps into something like longing, like desire. Like, why do people keep returning to Taylor Swift's early music even when it's been like 20 years since its release? Well, it's because I think for these adult women who maybe experienced Taylor Swift at the time, well, for them, it helps them tap back into this childhood experience, and they want to return to that on some level. There's this vast desire to return to this childhood experience. And even someone like me, though, who didn't listen to Taylor Swift as a teenager because, like, I was a very annoying, pretentious teenager who, like, would not be caught dead listening to teenage girl country music, like, come on. But who did then, in the year of the girl, decide that she needed to see what all the fuss was about, who did listen to Taylor Swift's back catalog and did indeed find in this back catalog of songs about the experience of being a teenager, stuff that I very much related to. You know, it brought up some longings, it brought up some desires, but it also brought up, I think for me, what I feel is lacking from my life. And that is, I think, what the marketization of childhood truly gets at. It's not as simple as it's bad, we shouldn't market the experience of childhood. It's getting at, well, like, what desire and what unmet need is present in people's responses to this marketization of childhood. So people are responding quite favorably to the marketization of childhood. They are buying the products that represent childhood to them. And why are they doing it? Because it represents something that they feel is lacking from their lives. Because it represents the person they want to be in a marketing concept. And like, who do they want to be? They want to be someone who is freer. They want to be someone who is not as bound by the strictures of adulthood that they feel now. They want to be someone maybe who can be just overtly romantic in the way of a teenage girl. But whatever it is, it taps into a desire. It taps into our wants, our needs. And that is what we're moving on to next. And the truth, I mean, at least the truth of my life, and I think the truth of many other people's lives, if, literature directed at adults is to be believed. If my own experiences can be extrapolated to relate to a wider group of people, and if the literature about adults written for adults is to be believed, adulthood can be quite a disappointing experience. It can be an experience of endless pressures to fit a certain mold, get a job and perform well in that job exactly according to the requirements of the employer, get married, have kids, set aside your foolish old childish hobbies, don't enjoy stuff purely and excitedly in the way you did as a child, just get on with it, make money. Writing about the portrayals of adult heroines in literature, Gia Tolentino wrote, "If the childhood heroine accepts the future from a comfortable distance, and if the adolescent is blindly thrust toward it by forces beyond her control, the adult heroine lives within this long-anticipated future and finds it dismal, bitter, and disappointing. Her situation is generally one of premature and artificial finality in which getting married and having children has prevented her from living the life she wants." I'm married and I don't find my married life to be dismal, bitter, and disappointing, but I do find many aspects of my adult life to be indeed dismal, bitter, and disappointing. A lot of my experience of work, for example, have just felt like a grand closure of possibilities. All of my youthful experiences of education and learning and trying always to develop new interests and ideas were basically whittled down into the need to, basically express the party line of the employer. Just do what the employer says all the time. And that was demoralizing. I've also found these portrayals of the disappointment of adult life in a lot more than just the kind of marriage plot-directed books about female heroines. I've also found this more generally in, the big literature of the 20th century, when, I've also read several books about male characters who had this shining, glorious experience of youth only to enter adult life and find that, well, it's just like a suburban nightmare, that any creative, artistic dreams go to die there, that all you can do is clock into your meaningless, bureaucratic 9-to-5 job and then go home and have dinner, and that's it. That's your life. Which, yeah. I guess, this is gender equality now, because that's also been my experience as a woman in the 21st century. But I also think, though, in kind of doing a bit of an armchair analysis of books I have read over the course of my life and my impressions of them, this is very generalized. Disclaimer, this is very generalized, and this is a very informal analysis, and I will put maybe a few of the examples that I'm citing in the description, but, because I think it'd be too hard to, go into, each thing deeply, but, what I've observed is that, at least, though, in this 20th century literature, in these big novels of the 20th century dealing with the disappointments and disillusionments of adulthood, a lot of the emotional weight of these books, though, came from the idea that the main characters still have desire, overriding desire beyond what they see in front of them as their option for experiencing adulthood. And I contrast this, though, to many of the literary books of the 21st century, where I often have trouble tracking characters' driving desires. I see many characters in literary, widely read and well-regarded novels entering into indifferent romantic attachments where you're like, do they even like each other? Like, why are they together? Like, is there any desire here? Where we have female characters just kind of floating around, not even really moving towards marriage or children or anything, but just kind of floating indifferently through life. They might wring their hands about the economy or the climate, but they take no action. They might be lyrically written or deal cleverly with sociopolitics, but the emotional core is lacking, this emotional core of desire. It's like a lot of these literary novels deal with a kind of generalized ennui with the state of society, a sort of flat doomerism about the future of the world, a state of despair and characters' reactions that show essentially capitulation to the orders that be. Ooh, we're getting darker as I talk about capitulation to the orders that be. Like, maybe the universe is just helping me out here with the dramatic lighting, maybe that's what it is. And so sometimes I wonder if we can see literature as a sort of canary in the coal mine, where I often feel right now that my actual experience of the world is living out that sort of 20th century desire and then frustrated desire, where it's like I kind of worry sometimes based on just the tone of a lot of discussions I see in, the online world, social media, the news, etc., that what we're heading toward is this just kind of blind, desireless capitulation to the state of society as it currently is. And I think that's terrifying. There's plenty I could say here about wages not keeping pace with inflation, about sky-high housing costs, about many jobs being socially unnecessary, and the jobs that are socially necessary being under-respected and underpaid. There's a lot I could say about the younger generations pretty much drowning in mountains and mountains of unpayable student loan debt from those educations that the adults in our lives told us were absolutely necessary to get a job, whereas now we're kind of coming to the conclusion, well, wait, there are no jobs. And if there are, well, AI is surely going to take all of them very soon. So what is the point? Where does this leave us? Like, this is kind of the doomerism, except like I'm trying not to be like just flatly doomerist here. I'm trying to actually say that, well, I think we need to think about things in a bit of a different way. And I hope that having new ways of thinking about these issues, having new frames for the experience of life in this world will bring us hopefully to a better reality where at least we can tap into our desires for what we want adulthood to be, even if the actual experience of adulthood might be a little bit disappointing for, a few more years. Let's hope. And what I've kind of come up with as like my little tagline is that the problem of adulthood is not a problem of age, but a problem of agency. I must be right because the sun is lighting me up much brighter. And I will say it another way, and this is that we long for a childlike state, perhaps, because it could be that childhood represented for many of us, or maybe not just childhood, but like adolescence, maybe early adulthood. It represented the last time when we maybe truly felt that we had a sense of possibility and we truly believed that we could act to realize those possibilities. And of course, I'm kind of generalizing about the experience of childhood, and I know that not everyone has an easy childhood, but I would say that broadly speaking, in childhood, you are told that you can be anything you want to be. And I think we actually should maintain that stance into adulthood. I think every adult should feel that they can be whatever they want to be. And in childhood, we have networks of adults surrounding us who want to encourage us to be whatever we want to be. We have parents, we have teachers, we have family members, we have a whole community of people around us, oftentimes as children, who want to foster our successful development and our learning. Whereas like when we're adults, we don't have any of that. Like if you're an adult and you're like, hey, I want to like explore this dream or like try out this hobby. Well, like the message is, well, you better find time to like do that around your full-time job. And like, ooh, I mean, does this dream or hobby require you to say like take a class that you'd have to pay for? Does it require you to buy like tools and materials? Well, you better be ready to pay for that too. And it's just like, okay, so like we can only have dreams as long as we have the money to pay for those dreams. But often the act of getting the money to pay for those dreams precludes us from having the dreams. When you're an adult, you're presumed to have already learned everything you need to have learned. But what if we could do it in a different way? And what if we could bring forth a vision of adulthood where we all live our dreams? Now that's what I really want. And that, I think, is why I kept longing for childhood. And so this fall, I'm going to try to keep living my dreams and live like a child, except actually not, because hopefully my dreams will become realities, right?